Okay, we're back for our second mini lesson on literary devices. Remember, literary devices are the terms that we need to know and understand so that we can talk about literature in class. So first we talked about the American short story plot structure, and there's 5 parts of it. There was the exposition, which is the beginning of the story, where you learn the characters, you find out the situation, and you find out the setting. Then you had the rising action after that. The rising action is where all the problems start showing up and the main character is trying to solve them. So it's also known as the complication. The highest point on our American plot structure was the climax, and that's where you're most into the story. And it's also where you find out what's going to happen with our character, whether ending is going to be good or bad. Usually it'll show up at this point. Then we have the falling action and the resolution, which is the end. That falling action can be very short in some stories. It can be really drawn out long in other stories, or it could be non-existent. It completely depends on the story. And then, of course, the resolution is the end of our story. So that was our first literary device that we talked about, the plot, the sequence of events that happen in the story. Our second is conflict, and I know you've talked about conflict in English class before. The conflict is the struggle the main character faces. These struggles are what push that action of the story along. As the main character tries to solve a problem, something else happens, and then something else happens, and something else happens, and in that process the sequence of our story continues and it moves the action on. Now there are 2 types of conflict. First we have external conflict, and there's 3 kinds of external conflict. The first is person versus person or group. So if our main character gets in a fist fight with his neighbor, that's person versus person. It's outside of his body, so it's external and it's against somebody else. Or you could have person versus group. It could be a small group of people, like a mob, or it could be person versus society. If a person wants to break the law and society says, no, that's against the law, that would be person versus society. Or if a person is rallying against the government, that would be person versus society. So that would be external in this category. Our second category of external conflict is person versus nature. So if a person is climbing a mountain, that would be person versus nature. If a person is trying to swim to Catalina and runs into difficulty out there in the ocean, that's person versus nature. Or if we have an earthquake, and a lot of us have trauma, whether it's a news story and it's true, which we know that does happen, or it's fictitious, like the movie about the earthquakes that's on Sci-Fi Channel all the time, that would be person versus nature. And then the last type of external conflict is person versus inanimate object or condition. Really, this is kind of 2 things, but a person versus an inanimate object. For example, when I was in high school, I was riding down the street, and I grew up on a farm, so I didn't ride a bike that much because everywhere was gravel. So one time we had taken my bike into a little town. I grew up in a very small town. And I was pedaling down the street, and I was looking around, and I went right into a parked car. Completely, I shot over. I didn't hit the car, but my bike hit, stopped, and I went right over the edge of the car. So, and that one would be person versus inanimate object. Person versus condition. A person who deals with a terminal illness or cancer, or for some reason has lost an arm or a leg. That would be a person versus a condition. Something that they're having to deal with that is a sickness or a disability. Okay, so these are our external conflicts. Person versus person or group, person versus nature, and person versus inanimate object or condition. Our second type of conflict is an internal conflict. This is a struggle that takes place inside of my mind, inside of my heart, inside of me. External is outside of me, internal is in me. So if I had a situation where, well, I was trying to make a decision if I was going to cheat on something, and I know that I shouldn't do that. I know it's wrong, but I really want to do that because I want a better grade. That's an internal conflict. Another example would be if you break your mom's favorite vase, and you know she'll be so upset with you. And she comes home and sees her vase broken. And you want to say, well, the cat ran by and knocked it off the shelf. You don't want to tell her that you were throwing the ball in the living room and broke her vase. And you're thinking, should I say the cat knocked it off and not get in trouble, the cat's in trouble? Or say that I was throwing the ball in the living room and I hit the vase and broke it? Should I do this? Should I do this? That's an internal conflict. So let's look at these examples and you decide what type of conflict they are. Internal or external? Two guys, one's throwing a punch, so it's pretty much external, right? A broken heart, it's internal. If you have emotions, they're usually internal conflicts. Oh, what's he? He's got completely a red face. So he's a little ticked off about something. So he's got some internal conflict going on there. Oh, here we have, let's think about this one. So we have the man talking and the woman crying. So there's probably some kind of disagreement that's a little bit of person versus person. So there's an external conflict there. But then you have the lady crying, so that indicates internal conflict for her. So you have both kinds here. And of course, an external conflict, people versus nature, some kind of strong wind or hurricane. Okay, so this will conclude your second little mini lesson on literary devices. So we've had plot, and now we've had conflict. So finish up the form and submit it, check your answers, and I will see you in class.